actually, I was incorrect when someone asked me earlier. He actually built that thing from scratch. So let's give him a big hand. Very impressive. If anyone is interested, that will be available for use, so you can put in your own questions and use that with your staff at a future event. Or our version with our questions will also be available. So we'll put that up on the DENR manager's website, or you can contact one of us and send it directly. Also, just want to let everyone know, earlier when we sent out the invitations, we did say that if you had any specific questions about the strategic plan that you'd like to ask the Secretary, you could email those in. If you didn't get a chance to do that, if you have a question you'd like to ask, you can either ask it during the session today, or we also have some index cards outside on the sign-in table. You can go ahead and write your question there, maybe over the lunch break, and put it in the box. And we'll get to those. Also, if you have not, there are sign-up sheets outside. Please do sign those before you leave today. And now we're ready to talk about the strategic plan. Who am I going to turn this over to this afternoon? Are you Secretary?
Over the past 3-4 months now, since we really focused in on developing a new strategic plan for North Carolina, I have talked to a lot of different groups. As I have traveled from one end of the state, met with different associations, met with different factions that have stakeholder interest in what the department does. I've had the opportunity to talk about strategic thinking. And I like to use the term strategic thinking mostly because when you start talking about, before a group, I'm going to talk about the strategic plan. Then the eyes glaze over and people kind of disconnect. But you talk about strategic thinking about where the department is going, people listen. And they're very much interested. And as I stand and talk about a particular aspect of the plan or our thinking, our plans, where we're going, I'll see people in the audience taking notes. I'll see people turning to pages in the program to make sure that they're taking in what it is that I'm talking about. And that's really good. Usually audiences give you signals about whether or not they're connected with what you're saying. You look out in the audience and somebody's snoozing, or they have the BlackBerry out and they're just really doing their full day's work while you're talking. You know they're not necessarily listening. But when I talk about the department's strategic thinking, they are listening and they are responding. I'll talk about our plans, and I'll get invitations afterwards to come talk yet to another group. Or I'll have specific questions about what it is that we hope to do and accomplish. What I'd like to do today, I'm going to go over some of the particulars of the plan with you. But here's the message for you today that I want you to take home with you, and I'm going to do some work to follow up on this. What we're doing here is really important. Let me say it again, it's really important. I like to tell people that if you have set your feet on the ground and you start moving and you want to go somewhere, you've got to decide first, where is it you're going? And so often, throughout my career, almost 40 years now, most of what I have ever done has always been steeped in the notion of planning. You really must plan well in order to get good results. And then once you plan, you have to get commitments to that, which is to say there must be ownership. Just because I say it's important doesn't necessarily make it so. I hope the reality is that it is important, is why it's important. And that oftentimes comes about by understanding, participation. It comes about by way of gaining that ownership of what we're doing. So today I hope when we leave here, one, we understand that this is important. I hope that you individually are coming to the conclusion that you own this as well as me. And I'm looking for something more, and this is the really hard part, and that is communicating this message to everyone throughout the department. It's really neat that I might understand it and know it, that senior management might understand it, leadership might understand it, but it's really not going to work and work well, particularly in some aspects of what we're talking about, unless the rank and file understand it and know it. And that's where I hope to get out and do some more communicating with our employees directly in the field and on the line, so that we can make sure that they understand and know what we're talking about. So with that, let me begin with some specifics about our plan. I'm not going to review the cover page, but let's talk a little bit about our mission and our goals, and then I'm going to touch on the broader 8 focus areas, the goals that are important. Later, Mandy is going to give you some specific assignments as to who the principal leaders will be for the 8 areas. But let's talk a little bit about the mission. This past weekend, how many of you in here watch NC Spin? Anybody in here watch NC Spin? A few? It's curious sometimes to watch the group of the talking heads who are always expert in everything. And some of them have really good thoughts and ideas. But they got to talking about this thing called water. And it was curious to listen to their conversation. And in some aspects of their discussion, they had a pretty good understanding of the importance. But it also told me that in trying to judge the understanding on the part of the public, I think there's still, as always, a lot of work to do. But it also brought home for me the notion that in North Carolina, our approach to water, because it's been so abundant and it's been so clear for us over the years that we had as much water as we needed, there wasn't much reason to worry about it. But that's not the case anymore. Growth is the major issue there. Having worked in 4 of the almost 500 municipalities that are in this state, I know what it's like to own and operate a local system. I know why it's important to have good supply, good water quality, operations, distribution system, treating that water once we've used it and returning it back to the streams from which we took it. But on that program, it really brought home for me the fact that we really need to reach out, provide more education as to what we're doing. And it brought home the idea that we need, in North Carolina as a state, to do a lot more planning, to have a plan for water in North Carolina. And this is just one example as we get into the mission. Because we don't. We don't have the broader comprehensive policy that probably is going to be needed as competing interests seek to have access and use of this very this very precious resource that in the future is going to be probably the things that great battles could be made over. And when I say battles, mainly legal battles and political battles. So, let's talk about the mission. To conserve and protect North Carolina's natural resources. We saw today in the video that was presented to us a good example of work that we're doing there. My hat's off to Lewis and everyone else in Parks and Natural Heritage, David and just the whole natural resources operation. North Carolina, I think, is a leader in this respect. And it's a difficult time right now because of the financial picture of exactly how we use our